Hey kids, Flexing Teacher Weber here. Hope you're having a good day. I wanted to do a little review of fraction and decimal conversions with you before you do a review assignment. So this is what we started before the holiday break, and we started off with fractions that were based out of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, putting them into decimal form. So this is essentially a mental math activity. 7 out of 1,000. You count the number of zeros on 1,000. There's 1, 2, 3. And that's going to tell you the number of decimal places in the decimal. 1, 2, 3. You want to have 7 thousandths. So you put 7 in the thousandth spot. A 0 in the hundredths, and a 0 in the tenths, and a 0 in the 1 spot. And that is 0 and 7 thousandths. Now, what we moved on to next is not every fraction is going to be based out of 10, 100, or 1,000. So you want to try to make it out of 10, 100, or 1,000 using equivalent fractions. So for this one, I recognize I could make it out of 10 or 100. I'm going to make it out of 100 by times by 5 times by 5. And I get 30 out of 100. 2 zeros on 100 tell us 2 decimal spots. And in them go a 3 and a 0. Whole number 3 in front. And we could also write this as just 3 and 3/10. Three over 8. Now we can't make this out of 10. We can't make it out of 100, but we can make it out of 1,000. Remember, we can multiply by 125. That's one I just want you to remember. And then if you do the same thing to the top, 3 times 125, 3 times 100 is 300. 3 times 25 is 75. So that's 375 out of 1,000. And once it's out of 1,000, that tells you the number of decimal spots. There are going to be 3 of them. And in them go 3, 7, 5 with a 0 in front. 375 thousandths. So those 3 fractions all created terminating decimals, decimals that come to an endpoint. Then we looked at some patterns that were usually based out of 9. Now this one here, 8 out of 9, remember we did division for that. We said 8 divided by 9. And when we did that, we got that was 8 tenths, but the 8 tenths was repeating over and over again. And we could also write that as bar notation, 0.8 with a bar on top. Now we discovered this pattern of 9. Any fraction out of 9 will have a repeating decimal like that. And then we took it a step farther and we looked at patterns of 11 that you have to know. Now what we discovered that with patterns of 11 is that you can make these fractions out of 99 by timesing by 9 times by 9. And you get 18 over 99, which is very similar to up here, right? Except for this one, since there's 2 9s, there's going to be 2 repeating digits, the 1 and the 8. They will be repeating. And the way we can write that is 0 and 18 hundredths repeating. We show that with a bar on top, bar notation. So that's how we started out. We started converting fractions to decimals. Now, when we started remote learning this week, we started taking decimals and converting them to fractions. And we started with terminating decimals. This one here, whole number 8, whole number 8. The digits behind the decimal become the numerator, so this one's a 4. Since there's 1 decimal place behind to the right of the decimal, there's going to be 1 0 in the denominator and a 10. 8 and 4/10. And then we always want to put these in lowest terms. In this case, we can divide the numerator and denominator by 2, and that's going to give you 8 and 2/5. Now, number 2, there's no whole number, but we do have 2 digits behind the decimal, so those will become the numerator of the fraction, 55. Now, since there are 2 decimal spots, 1, 2, there's going to be 2 zeros in the denominator and a 1. 55 over 100. And then, lowest terms, since 55 ends in 5 and 100 ends in 0, we can divide these by 5, and we get 11 over 20. Now we've got one final terminating decimal here. We've got a whole number 2. We've got 3 digits behind the decimals, so those 3 digits become the numerator of the fraction. Since there are 3 decimal spots, we need 3 zeros in the denominator and a 1 in front. So that's 2 and 125 over 1,000. Now, to put this in lowest terms, I immediately recognize that I can probably divide the top and the bottom by 25. Now I still have 2 wholes. 125 divided by 25 is going to be 5. And 1,000 divided by 25 is 40. Now I can reduce that further by dividing by 5. And I get 2 and 1 over 8. Don't be too discouraged if you can't get that in lowest terms, but if you get that far, you're doing pretty well. Okay, those were all terminating decimals. Then we have to look at repeating decimals. We know these two are repeating because they have the bar notation. So most things are the same. In this one, there's no whole number. 3 is the numerator because it's the digit behind the decimal. And then for every different repeating digit, we put a 9 in the denominator. And then we can reduce this one by dividing by 3. And I get 1/3. Now number 5, we have a whole number 5. The digits behind the decimal become the numerator, so there's 12. Now this is 5 and 12 hundredths repeating. It's a repeating one because it's got the bar on top. Now there are 2 decimal spots, 1, 2, and 2 different repeating digits, the 1 and the 2. So for every different repeating digit, we put a 9. So there's 2 9s on this one, 5 and 12 over 99. Now I recognize here that I can divide both the numerator and denominator by 3, and I get 5 and 4 over 33. So that's a summary of what we've done for the last couple of weeks. You've got to be able to convert a decimal to a fraction and a fraction to a decimal. This video is going to help you with your assignment today. Good luck with everything. Make sure you refer back to this. That's all for now. Flexing Teacher Weber, out.